Hello, wordsmiths. Have you ever read a book and hated the villain so much that your biggest motivation for finishing it was to watch him or her die an excruciating death? Well, you're not alone. Stick around. I'm going to teach you how to craft your most awesome villain. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Rory D. Nelson, author of the Brotherhood of Merlin series and its spin-off, The Hound of Hell. Here are my top 13 tips for crafting an awesome villain. Number 1, avoid the dark overlord trope. Some great examples of this are Voldemort from the Harry Potter series, Sauron from Lord of the Rings, of course, the Dark One from Wheel of Time. This is such an overdone trope, and really readers are getting tired of it. That's one thing that they've stressed in reader groups, is that they don't want to see this overdone trope. Next tip is avoid the villainous monologue. This is very cringeworthy. I would absolutely avoid this at all costs. Some great examples of the villainous monologue, of course, are from the James Bond movies. And we also have the spoofs of the villainous monologue in things like The Simpsons. Sideshow Bob, of course, was one of the ones that gave the villainous monologue. And of course, Bart ended up defeating him anyway. And my favorite one, of course, is the Martian from the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Yes, where he was trying to take over and destroy the Earth with this great laser that he made. And he went into this huge monologue. And meanwhile, while he had his back turned, Bugs Bunny took the key from it, rendering it impossible. And he thwarted him. So it has become kind of cartoonish, the villainous monologue. For the love of God, please avoid this from your books. Next tip is avoid the redemption arc. I've seen a lot of this in books, and I think it's really to the point where it's overdone. You do not need to give your villain a redemption arc. You do not need to redeem him. Okay, we do not need to see him redeemed. We just need to understand the villain. He needs to have some depth. So avoid the redemption arc. Next tip is consider giving your villain a redemption arc. Now, while I don't agree with giving your villain a redemption arc, I do, however, agree with giving your villain a partial redemption arc. What do I mean by that? I mean that the villain actually does something good, and it throws the whole plot out of whack and throws it a big, huge curveball. Probably the best example of this is from Kill Bill, Volume 2. We always believed in the first one that Beatrix was not only gunned down by Bill, but that her child had died as well. And we find in book 2 that that wasn't the case. Oh no, she lived, and he had actually raised her, and oddly, he actually did a pretty good job of it. Unfortunately, while it did throw the plot an awesome curveball, it was not enough to redeem him. He still has to die. He gunned down Beatrix. He more than likely would have killed her daughter as well, and the entire wedding party. So he has to die. There's no coming back from that. But it does add layers to the plot. So do consider giving your villain a partial redemption arc. Next tip is readers really love when you make the villain an absolute surprise. You don't know he's the villain, and you're finding this right out along with the protagonist as well, and it completely blindsides him. The backstabbing villain who is always the friend of the protagonist. This is a great trope to use, and one of the best examples I can use is the Count of Monte Cristo. If you haven't read that book, it is awesome. It is a great movie as well, but do consider using that trope. That will definitely add layers to your villain. Next tip is villains should be highly intelligent. Yes, they should not be dummies. They should not be easily thwarted. Take a look at some very intelligent villains like the Joker from the DC universe, the Penguin, Lex Luthor. Next tip is make your villains truly terrifying, as in truly terrifying. Does your villain walk into a room and does everybody cower? Does he do horrible things? Does he rape? Does he kill at will? These are all things that are going to seriously intimidate your protagonists and everyone around them. One thing that readers absolutely hate is always hearing about how awful a villain is. They actually want to see it. They want to witness how horrible he is. So give it to them. This next tip is also taken from readers groups. Readers really love when a villain was good at one time, but now he has gone on a path of evil. He may have even fought alongside the protagonist, side by side, fighting corruption, foes, assailants. And now he has gone bad for whatever reason. The best example of this is, of course, from Batman, Harvey Dent. He had acid spilled on his face, he lost the love of his life, and now he becomes the antagonist to Batman. That's probably the best example. Readers love this. They eat this shit up. So do consider using that trope in your books. This tip is also taken from a readers group. Consider making your villain so formidable that he may actually win, that it actually looks like he or she is going to win. Readers love that. Next tip is consider having more than one villain. If you have a particularly dark fiction like I write, you may have more than one villain. A great example of this is, of course, Gotham. The other one, Game of Thrones. There's almost everybody is a villain in Game of Thrones. So do consider having more than one villain. That is definitely going to add depth to your novel. Next, consider having a hierarchy of villains, a pecking order of sorts. You have the top level villains who are the absolute badass of them all, and then you have the lower ones and the lower ones. Best example, of course, is Gotham. The last tip is consider writing in third person omnipotent. There's a lot that you can do with it. It's a lot better than writing in first person. Also, the protagonist is not going to know a lot of what the antagonist or the villain is doing. Some readers, they're kind of split on whether they want to know what the protagonist knows or they want to know more than him. But do consider writing in third person omnipotent, because it definitely can add a lot more layers to your novel, especially because you're going to get a lot more perspectives. So that is something to consider. If you're getting value from this content, do hit the subscribe button and consider sharing it with another author, perhaps a friend of yours.